on a shift, which 2 shifts in a row makes a trend. He started targeting this area, and he was going after non-college white workers. Now his coalition not only includes non-college white workers, but non-college white, black, Hispanic, and every color of worker. He had major, major shifts with minority voters in 2024. Now, in 2016, it's a race to the bottom because you had a very large third-party vote. We had about an 8% third-party vote in Wisconsin in 2016. So Trump managed to win the state with fewer votes than Mitt Romney had 4 years before. But look at Clinton, down almost 240,000 votes. She was crushed also in Iowa. Iowa voted to the right of Texas in 2016. And Trump won Wisconsin largely because a lot of liberals didn't show up or cast their vote for Gary Johnson in the third party. So Wisconsin was probably the flukiest of Trump's 2016 wins, but the trend was still true. This result is going to be down to the wire. Trump benefited from that third party vote in 2016. So if we're already riding on the wave here, already on the trend, things are moving in our favor 2 elections in a row, and most importantly, the home team is collapsing in their support from former Democrat voters. Oh, Trump won in 2016 because 2-time Democrats, 2-time Obama voters changed sides and voted for him. Fact. Now in Pennsylvania and Michigan, if you look in those 2 states, Trump had large gains. Wisconsin was different. So to me, if Trump is going to hold Wisconsin in 2020, with the population dropping now, and voter registration, which I will get to, stagnant, then you're going to see Trump gain votes in 2020, and a lot of votes. And of course, we all know that Donald Trump went over 1.6 million votes in Wisconsin in 2020, and managed to lose to Joe Biden, who edged him out by 20,000 votes, or ballots, shall we say. The margin was 0.6%. 2000, 2004, 2016, 2020. 5 of the last 7 inside 1 point. So, Wisconsin is the cleanest of Pennsylvania and Michigan with the voter roll. Now, the execution of the 2024 election, not so much. But only 58% of your population is registered to vote. To contrast that with Michigan, 83% of their population is registered to vote. Only 77% of any population is even over the age of 18. So tell me why Michigan was even allowed to participate in the presidential election. And what happens to a sprinter when they pop hot for performance-enhancing substances? They don't run. That's beyond the point. All right, so 2024, we have a 90% turnout in 2020. There's not really a whole lot of wiggle room here. Unless we think that Trump is going to bring in 200,000 new votes. Well, the problem is the voter roll is smaller in 2024 than it is in 2020. The good news for Trump is he's pushing right up against 1.7 million votes, or 47% of your entire voter roll. If you get 50% of the entire voter roll, it's obviously impossible for somebody to win, even if there's 100% turnout, your opponent. So to me, it looks like Harris is going to be capped and probably not able to reach Joe Biden's numbers until she almost does. So the result is Trump by less than a point, 0.8%, 29,707 votes. And the Senate race was decided for Tammy Baldwin by 27,000 ballots. All right, hold that thought. So do we believe Wisconsin is tighter than we would have expected? It was also a Trump +4 when they called it for him on election night. Remember that. Now, what state, if I don't have party registration to look at in Wisconsin, so you don't register voters by party, 31 states do register voters by party, what state is your political cousin that tells me everything I need to know about Wisconsin? It ain't heaven, but it's Iowa. So Iowa, 99 counties, and all 99 counties are more Republican by registration than they were in 2020. That's a pretty good sign. Here's the comparisons between Iowa and Wisconsin. 6 of the last 7 elections, Iowa and Wisconsin have moved in the same direction, left or right together. The one where it did not was 2004, where Bush flipped Iowa from Democrat to Republican, and Wisconsin backed up by 0.1%. We went over that number in the 2004 race. The reason is because in 2000, when Ralph Nader ran third party, Wisconsin once again had a very large third party vote share, and when that repopulated itself into 2 parties, it moved the 2 apart in 2004. But from 96 to 04, the shift is the same. So this is a technicality. It's 7 of the last 7. The grain has basically been the same in Iowa and Wisconsin. And going back to 1936, all but 5 times in 23 elections, Iowa and Wisconsin have moved together. So currently, they're political cousins. Since 1956, both states either add Democrat votes together or they lose Democrat votes together since 1956. In 56, they varied. But this year, we're going to look at Iowa's numbers. You've got a trend here developing of 70 years of gaining and losing Democrat votes together in Iowa and Wisconsin. And they're never more than 9.8% apart in margin since 1936. Wisconsin, of course, has been sitting left of Iowa. So let's look at the numbers in Iowa. 2004, Bush. He won Iowa by as much as John Kerry won Wisconsin. Just barely got over John Kerry after having lost Iowa in 2000, just narrowly to Al Gore. Now in 2008, same move that happened in Wisconsin happened in Iowa. We have a more than 10-point shift to the left in Iowa. Remember, it was a 12-point shift to the left in Wisconsin in 2008. This comes greatly at the expense of John McCain and Obama picking up the white working class. Same movement. 2012, Obama holds Iowa, but by a reduced margin, just like Wisconsin. 2016, Trump flips Iowa big time. This is a shift of 15 points to the right. Large third-party share also in 2016 and in 2020. This is Trump plus 8 in Iowa. Now a slightly reduced margin. I believe the election in Iowa in 2020 was also fortified, which gave the illusion that Wisconsin also should be moving to the left. But still, you can see here that Trump's got commanding margins in Iowa. And since they moved together, if the Republican Party registration shift in Iowa is strong, remember, Iowa was only R+1 by registration in 2020 when Trump won by 8 points. In 2024, Iowa was more than R+10. All 99 counties on a Republican Party registration shift. And I've got the numbers back for Iowa. All but one county shifted more Republican in the results. And the one was a technicality in a depopulating county in the far southwest where Trump won by 44 points. And now we have Trump going up over 900,000 votes in Iowa in 2024. So where are we heading here? Likely going to be below 750,000 for Harris. And there she is with a big drop of almost 10% in Iowa. Drop raw votes in Iowa. Trump wins by 13 points. I told you that Iowa and Wisconsin have not been more than 9.8% apart since 1936. Trump is at 13.3 in Iowa, which is 3.5 points further to the right than the furthest Wisconsin and Iowa have been apart since 1936. So if I were at a casino, James took me to a casino one time over by Green Bay. We lost our ass. That was also when you caught me singing Nickelback and posted it on the internet. But if I were going to a casino and somebody said, I want you to bet on Wisconsin, and I'm going to tell you that Trump just won Iowa by 13.3% or 220,000 votes, how much will you bet on Trump winning Wisconsin? First off, I'll bet everything I own. Now, how much do you want to bet on Trump winning Wisconsin comfortably by at least 3.5 points? Because that's the 9.8 right there. Then I would have bet strong on that too, knowing what happened next door in Iowa, which has overlapping demographics. If you want to test that, go look at why Trump flipped Wisconsin in 16, why he should have held it in 20, and why he held it this year. It's because southwestern Wisconsin, which was Democrat farm country, has flipped heavily to the Republican side, and even enough to override the slight left shift in the Wow counties. Now, Iowa. These are the kind of maps you're going to see from me in the coming months as I get certified vote totals. How many of y'all remember my 3,143 county map, red, yellow, green, how much fraud I thought was in every county in 2020? It's going to be different this time. In fact, it's going to be really hard for people to argue with my numbers because this is just simple reflecting vote totals and reading trends from one election to the next. Now, if a county is in light green, it means Harris had fewer votes than Joe Biden in the county, light green. If it's in dark green, she had fewer votes than Hillary Clinton had 8 years ago, dark green. And if it's in blue, she gained votes. And what you'll probably see is varying shades of blue for percentage of votes gained. But for now, these two counties, Dallas County, which is the western suburban county of Des Moines, Polk County right here, she only gained 178 votes over Biden. 178 votes. basically twice the number of people that are here. And in Warren County, 88 votes. So basically she got Biden's votes plus everybody here. Not too much. Everywhere else she lost. So she's down more than 50,000 votes statewide. And in 52 counties, she had fewer votes than Hillary Clinton had. Fewer votes than Hillary Clinton had. Isn't that unbelievable? Now let's add Wisconsin, because these are about the same ballpark metrics for both states since 1936. They've been moving in the same direction. So we'd probably see Wisconsin with lots of dark green and lots of light green, correct? So this is my main finding from 2020 to 2024. Does anyone remember a narrative in October? It came out as the polls started to tighten, that Harris would lose the national popular vote, but what? Win the Electoral College. That was what the media put out as a narrative. Because in 2020, I've shown math all over the country that I believe Trump had the votes in 2020. He did not have the narrative. So COVID has destroyed the country. The economy sucks. This many jobs are lost. We have a virus that has no solution in sight. The narrative was there to allow 81 million votes to stand up. Well, Trump is going to finish around 77 to 79 million votes by the time California gets done sputtering out votes. That means it's going to require 84 or 85 million Harris votes to produce a result like the 2020 map. Nobody was going to believe that. So here's the narrative that she's going to lose the popular vote. We're going to get her 75, 76 million, but she'll win the Electoral College. So it seems to me that the solid red states and the solid blue states and their ballot harvesting networks were relaxed to produce a result like this, because the same one is there in Florida, in Texas, in New Hampshire, in California, in Washington State, in New Jersey. But all over Wisconsin, we've got more votes, even in the hinterlands of the state, than Joe Biden had in the COVID year in which mail ballots were flying all over the place. You also have more votes here in St. Croix County, but it's not a lot. She's not far over Biden's ballot count from 2024. Now, I populated some of these numbers here for counties where there's more than 2,000 votes added from 2020. Waukesha County has more than 4,500 new votes. Now, the problem with counties like that is we do have people moving over from Milwaukee County, so there are probably more votes. We don't know how many of those were real in 2020, and I don't know how many of them are real in 2024. Dane County is up almost 14,000. Doesn't sound like a lot. We've seen 14,000 votes added for Democrats from one cycle to the next, but that jump in 2020 was massive, up to 260,000, because you had Democracy in the Park, all these other cheats that were put in place. And of course, Dane County is choked out. I'm going to show you a slide here in a minute when we talk about the core issue. But it looks strange to me that Wisconsin has no issue sprouting new Democrat votes. Well, its neighbor that it is paired up with for 88 years is a Democrat death wish. Now, what happened in Iowa? 600,000 registrations in 2021 were moved from active to inactive, purge of the voter rolls. And they always seem to hurt one party more than the other. Democrats lost more than 200,000 registrations, 3-1 over the Republicans on active registrations. State moved from R+1 to R+10. And your results are fewer mail ballots to go out to fewer registered Democrats and be dunked into drop boxes over a 4-week early voting period. That's your problem in Wisconsin, one of them. How about turnout? Who knows how to calculate turnout? Because there's two ways to do it. There's the traditional way, the old school way, that those of you who've been watching political results for decades probably know, which is votes divided by registered voters. That's the traditional way to calculate turnout. People that want to cheat and cover up fraudulent election results have a new way to calculate it, and that's votes divided by eligible voting population, which of course they're not all registered to vote, which is why they brought in cheats like automatic voter registration. But that lowers the percentage of turnout when the final results are published. It was only 50% turnout. Only half the eligible voting population voted. Well, that's not how we've calculated this. Because in 2008, there were 2.98 million votes, which, by the way, was fewer votes than 2004. I left 04 off because the website, Secretary of State's website, doesn't have voter registration numbers. But in 08, there were fewer votes cast than there were in 04. There were 3.5 million registered voters. So an 85% turnout of the registration roll. And then in 12, 87%, which is high, but it's in line with this. only 13,000 increase in the roll. Vote total is not high elevated in 2012. And in 2016, we're back below 2008 and 2004 levels. This is Trump Clinton in the race to the bottom. Turnout was 83.6% of the voter roll. You can see it's been right around 3.5 million for 3 elections in a row. Now in 2020, one of the things I found in all the states is a bloating of the voter roll. It's hard to tell if this is an organic growth of the voter roll in 2020 or if it's a bloating of the roll. We've found registration fraud rings all over the country, even right across Lake Michigan and Muskegon County. In 2020, we've got a turnout almost at 90%. 90%. This is almost Soviet Union level stuff. Right around 3.7 million registered voters, but here's your massive jump in votes of more than 300,000 new votes cast in the 2020 election that Donald Trump supposedly lost by 20,500 plus ballots. 89.5% turnout, voter roll expanded by 126,000. So in 2024, the good news is the voter roll has shrunk, but we also get a turnout of 93.4%. Fewer registered voters, 117,000 more votes. The voter roll is reduced by more than 26,000. Your turnout of the voter roll is 93.4%. Like I told you, Donald Trump got 47% of this number and almost lost the state. Why is that? It's because you have a massive loophole that your Senate candidate lost by because of same-day voter registration. There were 219,000 same-day voter registrations in 2020. I do not have a solid number yet for 2024, but I will tell you that Milwaukee County was through the roof. Through the roof. All right, final scorecard on Iowa versus Wisconsin. Trump plus 13.3 in Iowa, plus 0.8% in Wisconsin. The difference is 12.5 points, which is the widest gap between the two since 1936. Was anybody in this room alive in 1936? How many of your parents were alive in 1936? Less than 10 of you had parents alive in 1936. This was Franklin Roosevelt's first re-election in the middle of the Great Depression, when he still won Iowa by 12 points, but he won Wisconsin by 32. This is a joke of a result. And you remember, Wisconsin was Trump plus 4 when the press called it. And Hovde ran what? 1.5 behind Trump. Trump plus 4. Iowa at 13.3% is a 9.3% gap, which is right in line where Iowa and Wisconsin have ran together in 2016 and 2020. So 4 ways that you guys can focus on in saving Wisconsin. And this is very light on the legislation that you will not get passed because of your pathetic, pathetic speaker. And I'm not from Wisconsin, so I can say whatever the hell I want. Your pathetic speaker, your worthless assembly leadership, your compromised Democrat governor. Hey, this is light on legislative fixes, but it's big on you exposing this stuff and shining a light on it because the hammer of justice is on its way in January. Okay, number 1, I need you all to pay attention to this. How many of y'all follow Scott Presler? Okay, I am not an anti-Scott Presler person. Okay, I'm not here to bash on anybody. He does a lot of good things with voter registration. I never get into the mix on social media when people are going after him or going for him. I do not agree with him on automatic voter registration. He says that we need to get hunters, dairy farmers, which you're all over here, and other people that are aligned with our way of life and view of the world automatically register when they apply for a fishing license, a hunting license, or a dairy license. I'll tell you why I don't agree. Like everything, I need you all to agree or disagree on things based on your own research and your own understanding of a topic, not because somebody told you so. Look it up. Be willing to disagree. Do not allow for any discussion to form about automatic voter registration in this state. In fact, I am shocked that your governor did not mandate this like Josh Shapiro did in Pennsylvania. Here's what happens in automatic voter registration. Now, on the left, states that had automatic voter registration in this election. Harris won 18 states in Washington, D.C. Trump won 6 states in the 2nd District of Maine. 221 electoral votes for Harris and 64 for Trump. Last time it was worse. It was 243-9 for Biden over Trump. Trump managed to win Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Nevada this time around, and Georgia. States that did not have automatic voter registration went 248-5 in favor of Donald Trump in the Electoral College. The only state that went blue was New Hampshire. And then you had the 1 vote from Nebraska. That was Trump with 25 states and Harris with 1. So what's going on with the automatic voter registration and what does it tell us? Number one, all election fraud is rooted in the voter roll. It's all in the voter roll. It's a credit line of eligible ballot holders for mail-in balloting. What I believe is that our elections are much more defrauded by manual paper stuffing and ballot stuffing with armies of activists. And of course, if I look at the map of St. Croix and Pierce counties from the last 2 elections, what it looks like to me is ballot harvesting gangs are coming across the lake from the Twin Cities and harvesting your ballots out. Someone's giving a list out of dormant registrations and where to find the ballots and stuff them in. I doubt very much that Hudson-based harvesting rings are running all over this county. Maybe there's some local harvesting that goes on, but I think the main crime is coming out of the major metros. But when they have these registrations that are sitting there dormant, whether they're duplicated or triplicated, or they belong to someone who's dead, or they belong to a bogus registration, which is the thing if you look at Pennsylvania busting all the election fraud rings. Then you have registrations that are sitting there and no one ever turns out 100% of the roll. And they know who didn't vote or who can't vote, and then the ballots get backfilled as a request. There's fraud in the request, there's fraud in the registration, and there's fraud in the ballot being stuffed. And it's interesting to me that on that map I showed you of the blue and green, in the counties that Harris lost votes in the rural areas, sometimes we're talking about 20 votes, almost an identical ballot total. It seems like the same ballots are targeted every election to turn them in and collect them like little Pac-Man dots. Seriously. And then in the states that don't have automatic voter registration, you have generally cleaner voter rolls. Are they perfect? No. North Carolina has lots of issues, and they're being exploited right now with the Supreme Court justice race that is being ripped off. In fact, it's being rigged, and would you believe what this Democrat's name is who's going to win this fake election? Riggs. Riggs. Perfect name. Do not allow any conversation about automatic voter registration to take root in that assembly. Anything you can do. Because it's going to come up, because this is the only way that the blue wall can hold up, because Michigan and Pennsylvania both have it, and it is a miracle that Trump won either. Step number 2. And by the way, I should mention that Milwaukee County had 35,000 fewer registered voters in this election than it did in the last. So they had to take advantage of same-day voter registration for Harris to equal Biden's vote count in Milwaukee County within 1,000 votes. Step number 2, there are 2 counties that if the Democrats cannot max it out, max the vote count out, they have no chance to win the state. And I'm talking about Dane and Milwaukee counties. Milwaukee County is much less of a problem for you than Dane is because they've maxed out. Population is declining, voter roll is shrinking. Even with the cheat there this year that cost the Senate race, Trump did about 8,000 votes better off in margin in Milwaukee than he did last time because he's got his own gains there, and they're having a hard time, to speak electoral dysfunction, keeping it up. In Dane County, we have a lot of problems. And number one, you do have an organic Democrat base there of brainwashed college kids, white liberals, professors, and they overwhelm the agricultural areas on the outside of the county. But this is one of the jewel slides of the 2020 election. I believe this was Erin Yeager and her team that came up with this work, and she's done a lot of great work here. If you see her, she couldn't make it tonight. But this is an expose of Dane County. And you can see a lot of very special apartments here, like this one here with 20 units and 312 registered voters when they were canvassed, which is 16 registered voters per unit in this apartment complex. This Soviet-looking building here, we've got 341 registered voters in 15 units, which averages out to 23 registered voters per unit. And then, of course, some of you may have seen in Racine County, the sheriff there, Sheriff Schmaling, busted the fraud going on in the nursing homes. And this is a 2-to-1 registered voter to bed ratio in an assisted living center. When people have access to the file and they know what registrations are on there to be exploited and taken advantage of, they can collect the same ballots every single election. So this is Dane County. This is a surprise to absolutely nobody. In fact, they don't even obey the rules that are put in place by the state legislature. Democracy in the park being one example. Or the way that in 2020, the indefinitely confined voter list was exploited, where nobody has to show ID for their mail-in ballot requests. So your state has been getting ripped off for quite some time. And of course, I'm also going to talk about Milwaukee. I don't know how many times Lucy has to pull the football out from under Charlie Brown before he raised hell about this. Scott Walker should have found that out in 2018. Donald Trump found out in 2020. Tim Michaels found out in 2022, and this time, guess what? We scanned 31,000 ballots that we had to retabulate. That's your excuse to count ballots all night after Donald Trump is called the winner. Everybody's going to be so happy that Trump finally won the election. Forget all the down ballot races, including the United States Senate, including James. How many seats were lost in the Assembly? 10 seats in the Assembly. With a 6-point swing in the national popular vote to the right, moving a state that has been trending right for the last 16 years, only 1.5 points to the right. Am I making sense to anybody, or do I need to hang it up? Okay, number 3, litigate same-day registration loopholes. That's the Hovde campaign. We shouldn't be hearing a damn word about running for governor. We should be hearing every word about talking about the 24 theft. We need to be going after the same-day registration loopholes. Those big gains I show you in Eau Claire County, for example, Eau Claire County is not gaining significant population. Dane County bursting at the seams with voter turnout when they already bloated it in 2020, when similar counties and similar states have very little growth. None of these other college counties have major growth. Brown County, where Trump's gaining tons of new votes, getting caught from behind by thousands of new Democrat votes over the Biden total of 2020. This has to be exploited for the Democrats to win. Same-day voter registration. Trump got 47% of the pre-election day voter roll and almost lost the state. Same-day voter registration. It's being taken advantage of. There were 219,000 same-day registrations in 2020, and I don't have a solid number yet for 2024, but I'd be willing to bet you that it's much higher, given that the voter roll was smaller going into Election Day this time around than it was last. If that can be tied up, whether it's in the courts, it's not going to happen legislatively, unfortunately, but if this can be fixed, Wisconsin is going to be a 3 or 4 point lean Republican state from here on out, like Iowa. And number 4, stop going to bed on election night. Donald Trump won the election, and everybody said, I'm going to bed. I'm going to bed. James, right? Who stayed around at the ballot center the whole time? Nobody stayed around at the ballot counting center all night. Once Trump won, everyone left, including the lawyers that were supposed to be there that should have known better. Milwaukee County failed its own tabulation on purpose to allow itself time to count all night long. In fact, if you see the leaked emails from their elections officials in 2020, they were proud of their actions in 2020. Milwaukee comes in every election with massive dumps of absentee ballots. Meanwhile, Florida and all of their massively large counties have 99% of their vote total reported on election night. If any state can do that, there's no excuse for any other state to do the same. So you guys are going to continue to be ripped off. I don't care if Iowa goes to R+20. You guys are going to continuously be ripped off in 1-point races in this state until you close these loopholes up. That's the facts. And once we finally get where we're going, we'll be busy installing these 10 points to true election integrity. And my hope is that I can integrate somewhere in this administration and help make these reality. If you've never seen these before, the first step is to clean out the voter rolls, which is what I've harped on tonight. There is one state that has no voter rolls, and it happens to have the cleanest elections in the country. I'm talking about North Dakota. North Dakota only added 3,000 total new votes to the 2024 election, after there were already fewer new Biden versus Trump votes than there were Trump versus Clinton votes in 2016. There are no voter rolls. You show up with an ID, you get a ballot. Now, someone brought up the point about citizenship earlier. There have to be checks to make sure that we're talking about citizens, but I will also tell you that non-citizen voting is not common. The problem you have with elections is phantom ballots being cast on registrations that don't show up to vote. Number 2, ban all electronic elections equipment. Now, I am more of a manual fraud guy, but we don't have any transparency. Like in Arizona, there's no transparency afforded to us with the tabulation of ballots. We have no idea what these ballot marking devices are doing, and if you look at places like Pennsylvania, we've got this equipment failing all throughout Election Day, creating long lines, turning people away. In fact, in Maricopa County 2 years ago, they were set up to fail spectacularly and turn away what they knew was going to be a 3-to-1 Republican turnout on Election Day. Point number 3 is to enforce voter ID with paper ballots only. Voter ID, very important. You've seen the map. Voter ID, red state. No voter ID, blue state. I think that's more of a correlation than a causation. The same states that are going to permit not allowing voter ID are also going to have automatic voter registration and mail ballots going all over the place. It's lawlessness. Number 4, ban mail-in voting. Has an asterisk there. because it should say severely restrict mail-in voting. I'm okay with overseas military or legitimately disabled mailing in an absentee ballot.